Hello everybody, and welcome back to Think Outside the Board. I am your host, Brian Toohey, and today I am recording another monthly update video. I do 2 of these every month, and they're mainly designed to show you, in my opinion, what the best currently running Kickstarters are that you could back. So today I've got 8 of those, and the funding period is April 19th to May 2nd, which means that these 8 Kickstarters will complete their funding in that time frame. I also talk about the games that I personally backed in the last period, so of the games that were profiled in the previous video. And today, that is one game only. It's actually not even on Kickstarter. And then I talk about the games that I've acquired into my collection since the last video, and there are 5 of those games today. And then finally the games that I've played since the last time I made one of these bi-monthly update videos. And today we've got 2 of those. So let's get things started, shall we, with the first of the currently running Kickstarters. This one is Mythic Battles Ragnarök. It completes funding on April 19th. Which is Monday. I'm recording this on Friday, so I'm hoping to get it edited and published tonight or tomorrow, and then at least it'll be up for the weekend. The minimum requested funding on this project was $250,000. No small ask. Mythic Battles Ragnarök and Monolith. And they're at $1.5 million, so that is 6.25 times their requested minimum funding. This is a medium-heavy game for 2 to 4 players. It's a miniatures skirmish game. Now, most of the currently running Kickstarters I'm going to talk about today are by fairly well-established companies, publishers. So I'd say these are all on the low to medium-low risk. There's one exception, which I will talk about when we get to it. But other than that, these are all kind of low, medium, low. Monolith has money. They've done pretty well. So they have produced games like Batman Gotham City Chronicles. I believe there were 2 different Kickstarters for that. They did Claustrophobia and the more recent kind of update to that, Claustrophobia 1643. They did the Conan game and Mythic Battles Pantheon. So most of Monolith's games feature these trays and cards that slot into them. The ones that players use to control a whole mess of characters. Usually in that kind of game, there's one player who's kind of the one that is fighting the many, and the many can be one player in a game like Claustrophobia 1643. Or in other games like Batman, you could have several players playing against this character that is kind of playing the villains. And in those cases, that contraption that the player is controlling various villains with is called the River. Now, Mythic Battles Pantheon doesn't follow that same formula, and nor does Mythic Battles Ragnarök, but it is still kind of based in that card selection activation model that Monolith has kind of excelled at. Now, I've had one friend say, I'm not going to back this because I have so many of their other games and they're all the same game. And they're not, but they do have a similar system, even though the Mythic Battles games are a little bit different. But you could look at it and just say that they've kind of perfected a certain type of gaming archetype, a certain method for gameplay, which is the way that they do most of their games. So the designer of this game is Benoit Vaught, who designed the previous Mythic Battles game, Mythic Battles Pantheon. And everyone may not realize this, but he designed a previous game in 2012 called Mythic Battles that Pantheon was then updated from. So Mythic Battles in one form or another have really been his go-to bread and butter. Now, unlike Pantheon, which had a bunch of artists, this game just has 2 credited artists on it. Arnaud Boudoiron, who is known for games such as Bloodborne, the most recent version of Kemet Blood and Sand, and Assassin's Creed Brotherhood of Venice. Also, art from Pascal Quideau, who has worked on Elysium, 2 of those Sherlock Holmes consulting detective games, Splendor, Time Stories, the base game, Watson and Holmes, and 2 of the previous Monolith games, Claustrophobia 1643 and Mythic Battles Pantheon. Now, this game is a standalone game, so you don't need Pantheon to play it. And in fact, it's kind of a new take on Pantheon. So Pantheon was Greek gods. So you had Zeus and Hermes and Ares and all of those Greek gods. Ragnarok is basically the Norse version of that. So you're going to have kind of the Thor type gods like Odin and Thor himself and Midgard's in there and all that Norse mythology. So essentially going from Pantheon to Ragnarok, they kind of traded in Greek mythology for Norse mythology. I don't know that you really would need both of those games if they're doing something similar, but I don't know. They maybe kind of have different enough stuff that you may be able to get things out of both games. So for $119, you can pledge the new game Ragnarok. If you really want the previous game Pantheon, you can pledge at the $135 level, and that will not get you Ragnarok, but it will get you Mythic Battles Pantheon, the 1.5 version, and it will get you all of the stretch goals from that game's campaign. Now, if you want to get both of the games with all the stretch goals for both games, that is a $239 price tag. And if you really want to go all in on this, it's going to be $299. And that will get you Ragnarok with a lot of extra stuff. So you'll get 5 expansions with it. You'll get sleeves for all of the cards, and you'll also get this artwork book. Now that pledge level, that $299, will not get you Pantheon 1.5. So if you want to do that, if you want to get that, I do not see it listed as an add-on. But often with these types of games, you'll be able to add on other pledges in the pledge manager. So if you want to get both of them and you want to get everything for Ragnarok, my advice would be to pledge at the $299 level. And then when you eventually get your pledge manager stuff, you probably can add on the $135 Pantheon 1.5 core box with the stretch goals as a additional pledge within your pledge. So I think that's the safest bet to do it, since there is no actual pledge to get both games if you want all the expansions for Ragnarok. And I think probably pledging that $239 level and then trying to add on all of the expansions for Ragnarok separately in the pledge manager, I have a feeling that will end up costing you more. Usually if you try to add on a lot of stuff piecemeal, it's more expensive. So if you really want both, I'm not 100% on this, but probably I think what you should do is do the $299 for Ragnarok with everything, and then just try to add on that extra pledge level in the pledge manager. Again, this is Monolith's Mythic Battles Ragnarok, and it will complete funding on April 19th. Then on April 20th, we have John Company 2nd Edition. Now, this one came in with a minimum required funding of $50,000. It's currently sitting at $640,000, so it's done really well. It's at 13 times their asking price. Now, John Company definitely slots into the heavy complexity of games. So it's a heavy game for 1 to 6 players, and it's sort of an economic negotiation game. Now, this is being put out by Whirligig Games, which is Cole Wehrle's own personal production company. The only other game that they've put out is PAX Premier 2nd Edition, and you can get that game here as well. And it's an amazing game. And I think both of those games have something in common, which is that in both of them, players are using kind of an area majority mechanic for different companies or armies, but players are not aligned with any one of those companies or armies. So they're trying to kind of get a certain company or a certain army in a winning position, and then they want to be aligned with that company or army. In PAX Premier, it's armies. In John Company, it's companies. So this is, of course, designed by Cole Wehrle, and he designed the first editions of both of these games, PAX Premier and John Company, but they were published through Sierra Madre Games. So I think it's probably a good thing that Cole Wehrle is doing these second editions through his own company. And also, Cole Wehrle is the designer of Root. And there have been many, many versions, expansions of Root, several Kickstarters over the years. And that's kind of what Cole has been doing lately. But he's also been getting these second editions of his games published. And I can speak for PAX Premier 2nd Edition, which I own. It's great. The component quality, the cards, everything about it is just so well designed. You can tell that Cole really just spent a lot of time thinking about every tiny little production choice and design choice and making sure the production was just right. So even though his company, this is only their second Kickstarter, you're in good hands with them. And I really would trust them. I would not be too worried about this campaign. So let's talk a little bit more about John Company. So John Company has got some troubling themes, I think, but the way that the game views those themes, in my opinion, is a positive. So it is about state-sponsored trade monopolies, the British East India Company, and sort of British imperialism. So you're going to be using these companies to expand your empire. So there is sort of colonization themes on this, but it's through an economic trading companies. Not that they didn't do anything wrong, but the view of them in this game is that they were flawed and problematic. So this game is it's not trying to pretend that colonization is good, but it does have that as a theme, and you should be aware of it. Now, the interesting thing about this game is that even though it's kind of an economic game, your ability to win or lose is going to depend not on an economic related score, but on reputation. So much like in PAX Premier, you're going to be doing things to try to accelerate the success of these various companies. And then once one of those companies is doing well, you'll want to try to align yourself with that company. Price points on John Company 2nd Edition. For $70, you can get PAX Premier 2nd Edition with the Kickstarter stuff. For $80, you can get this new edition of John Company with the Kickstarter elements. And for $150, you can get both. So easy peasy, 70, 80, 150, depending on whether you want one game or both. And again, I have a lot of faith in Cole Wehrle and in Whirligig Games. I think their PAX Premier 2nd Edition was fantastic. I do not expect anything less from John Company. And I think if you're okay with the theme of this game, I think this version of the game and Cole and his company Whirligig Games are going to handle this in the sort of most honest, respectful way possible for this theme. Okay. And again, this is a Kickstarter that completes funding on April 20th. And also on April 20th, Lasting Tales will complete its funding. Now, their minimum requested funding was $100,000. They're currently sitting at about $1 million, so that's 10 times their requested funding. Lasting Tales is a medium-heavy game for 1 to 5 players, although I think it's on the light side of medium-heavy, so it's kind of like right there between medium-light and medium-heavy, but on the medium-heavy side. And this game is being published by Blacklist Games, who have published a lot of the Sadler Brothers games, including Alter Quest, Brook City, Street Masters, Dire Alliance Horror, and Hour of Need. Now, Dire Alliance Horror is a game that this is sort of connected to because Blacklist put out a series of fantasy miniatures first. So there was no game attached to that. They were just fantasy miniatures. Then they did this campaign for Dire Alliance Horror, which also had miniatures. This time they were sort of horror-themed miniatures, but this had a whole game attached to it. This was an actual game. Although, through that campaign, you could also get the fantasy miniatures that had previously, come out as a part of their own campaign. Now, Dire Alliance Horror is sort of a miniatures game. It's designed by 2 pairs of designers. One are the Sadlers, who've worked on a lot of stuff for Blacklist Games. And the other one is Trevor Benjamin and David Thompson, who have worked on the Undaunted series, which I hear is fantastic. And they've also worked on the War Siege series, which I know is really good. So you had these kind of 2 pairs of really good designers working together to create this miniatures skirmish game called Dire Alliance Horror. And there was a cooperative mode and a competitive mode. It was called, I think, battle mode and raid mode. So raid mode was the cooperative mode. Now, this is essentially the same kind of game as Dire Alliance Horror, except this is the fantasy version. It's called Lasting Tales, and this is a game that is actually using those fantasy miniatures that were a Kickstarter campaign sort of 2 campaigns ago in this series. The difference is that none of those designers that I mentioned are involved in this game. So it's kind of using the blueprint from Dire Alliance Horror, but there is no competitive mode for this, so it is cooperative only, and it has been designed, I think, using some of the blueprints of Dire Alliance Horror, but by a different designer and artist. So the designer on this one is Mark Latham, who previously worked on The Walking Dead All Out War. And the artist is Diego Gilbert Lawrence. Diego Gilbert Lawrence previously worked on Mage Wars Arena, and those are the two guys responsible for Lasting Tales, which is this cooperative-only version of Dire Alliance Horror. You can also use the miniatures and the cards from Dire Alliance Horror if you want to put some horror-themed minis in your fantasy campaign. But as I said, it does not have a competitive mode in this version of the game in Lasting Tales. Now, for $40, you can get the Lasting Tales hardcover book, which is essentially the game. Okay, there is no actual box, there's no game, it's all coming from a book. And this is something that makes Lasting Tales, specifically this version, because Dire Alliance Horror did not do this. They had a board, and they had the miniature, and they had a box, and they had a game. For $75, you'll get the new miniatures that are being created as a part of this campaign, the new fantasy-themed miniatures. For $109, you can get both. So you're going to get the book that is essentially the game book, and you'll get the miniatures. For $225, you'll get a version that includes the previous miniatures in that campaign that was just miniatures. So there is no way to get the Dire Alliance Horror game through this campaign. You can get the miniatures, but you can't get the actual game. So these are all things to be aware of. It is a cooperative-only game. It doesn't come with a game box. It comes with a book, and it comes with the miniatures. And as add-ons through this campaign, you can get all kinds of terrain and doors and things like that. However, even at that level, there's no map or anything, and they're kind of encouraging, it seems to me, they're kind of encouraging people to create their own kind of maps and stuff and use the terrain to do this. So I don't know if this is a game that I would want to back, because I kind of like to have everything put together for me. I like a game board. I like a box. But certainly it's doing $1 million in business so far. So there are a lot of people that this does appeal to, and you may be one of them. Next up, completing its campaign on April 23rd, we have Sentinels of the Multiverse Definitive Edition. Now this one had a minimum requested funding goal of $50,000. They're currently at $383,000, so it's over 7.5 times their minimum funding. This is a medium light game for 1 to 5 players. And when I say medium light, it's on the high end of medium light. So it's just as Lasting Tales is kind of on the light end of medium heavy, Sentinels of the Multiverse is on the heavy end of medium light. So they may actually not be that far apart. And this is a cooperative card game. It's superhero themed, but it's not related to any IP. So it's not Marvel, it's not DC, it's just something that was created for this game. And this is being put out by Greater Than Games, who have done all of the previous Sentinels of the Multiverse stuff. They've also done all of the Spirit Island stuff. And they've also done a game called TAC, which just had a very recent retail re-release. So those are kind of their big games. Now, it is designed by Christopher Bedell and Adam Rabataro, and they both worked on Sentinels. It's kind of their big thing. So they kind of co-designed Sentinels together, and then Adam did the art on it as well, and he's doing the art here. And he has also done the art on Spirit Island and a game called Homebrewers, which is kind of a beer brewing card game. Now, this version, and this is kind of important because this is a new version of the game. So it has new art, new stories that are being told throughout the gameplay, and streamlined mechanics, which means that when you back through this campaign, you're going to get a new version of Sentinels of the Multiverse, a redesigned version, which also means that you cannot get any of the expansions through this campaign. The new game, I don't think, is designed to work with them. It's kind of designed to be a new, reimagined, new, better version, but I think it kind of plays on its own with the updates that have been done. It also includes some foil cards and things. So for $50, you can get a new version of the core game with a foil promo pack. Jumping up to $125, so that's a $75 increase, you're going to get that exact same thing, but with sleeves. It seems like a lot to me, just for sleeves, but there are 900 sleeves in that $75 increase, and 50 of those sleeves are for tarot-sized cards. So perhaps that is an appropriate increase, but it kind of seems like a lot to me. Anyway, this is a new version of Sentinels on the Multiverse. The campaign runs until April 23rd. Personally, I don't think I'm going to back this one, because when I back stuff like this, I tend to like to scoop up all of the previous content, and the way that this game is being put out, you can't, right? This is kind of a new version of the game. So for me, I think I'd probably wait to see if this one hits a retail or something like that. Also, the foil cards, I'm not a huge fan of. I think, personally, instead of getting foil cards, I would rather have had the ability to get all those previous expansions, assuming that they actually worked with this game, which they probably don't. But anyway, Sentinels of the Multiverse, Definitive Edition, April 23rd. And if you haven't played Sentinels before and you just want to get your feet wet, this is probably a really good way to do it. Just know that it is a standalone thing and it may not mix with the other expansions. And then on April the 24th, funding completes for Longshot, the dice game. This had a minimum requested funding of $10,000. Right now they're sitting around $80,000, which is 8 times their initial asking price. This is a light game for 1 to 8 players. It is a dice rolling roll and write. Now it's being published by Perplexed, who previously did Longshot, not the dice game, just Longshot, and Roll and Write, that's an actual name, Roll and Write. So it is a roll and write game, but it's clever. So roll and write, the dice game. Now, Chris Handy designed this. He also designed the original Longshot and Roll and Write and a game called Cinque Terre. And Klaus Souza did the art, and she also worked on Roll and Write, the dice game. Now, this one is $25 if you want to pledge for Longshot. If you want to get Roll and Write along with it, $48. And again, it's going to complete funding on April the 24th. On April the 27th, this is the game that I mentioned that does not have as good a reputation company-wise as the other, so I think it's a little bit more risky to back this one. I suppose Perplexed, the company that did Longshot, is not quite as prolific as most of the other companies that I'm profiling right now as well, but they've done a few games. Scrumpy Card Cider, which is what we're talking about now, which is going to complete funding on April 27th. This is their first game, so this is a little more risky. Now, their minimum requested funding was $15,000. They're currently sitting at $22,000, so they are funded, and they're at 1.5 times their requested funding. Now, this is a medium-light game, I think, for 1 to 4 players. It could push over into medium heavy, but I think it's gonna land on the medium light side. But I'm not 100% because I don't know anything from this company. But it is a deck building game. The company is called Invincible Games. This is their first Kickstarter, and this game is designed by Paul Harris, who previously has only done this very not well known game called Reforestation, and the art is by Bernie Todd, and this is her first published game because she is 14 years old. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that this is not a sort of vanity project being done by, a family so their kid can do the art. Bernie Todd's father is a board game professional, and if you look at the art on this 14-year-old's art is great. I mean, it's super professional, and this is being put out as a professional artist who just happens to be 14 years old. So this isn't kind of a vanity production being done by a family with kind of like homespun art. This is someone who just happens to be young, but is already putting out very professional art, which I think is exciting. That kind of makes me want to back the game. Now, for $46, you're going to get Scrumpy Card Cider. And you can look out on the internet if you want to see some videos. Tom Heath, aka Slicker Drips, did a gameplay video of it. So did Rahdo, Richard Ham. Rahdo Runs Through, and they both really, really loved this game. Now, on the side of the game being a little more unsure, it is a first-time publisher. It is a first-time Kickstarter. And the art that they're working with, Rahdo and Tom Heath, looks a little rough. Like the prototype looks a little rough. So I think everyone's hoping that it will look great when it's finished, but it is a prototype they're working with, and it needs to be improved. So just know that. However, they both say amazing things about it, and they both say that it brings something new to the deck building genre that they've never seen before, which is that you are making drinks. It's a cider game. So it's kind of like many other games out there where players are, using various mechanics and card mechanics to craft drinks. So for $46, you're going to get the game, Scrumpy Card Cider. And if you want to pledge at the $193 level, which is a huge jump up, you will get a custom card made for you. This is what I call vanity rewards, because it's not something that you need, and it generally is something that's very, very specific that you're having done just for you, like a specific card made with your image or something like that, or something signed. But things that you won't be able to find at retail that are very specific to your person. So in the $193 pledge, you will get a custom card made for you, of you, by the artist, a custom poster, and you'll also have your version of the game signed. So $193. And again, Scrumpy Card Cider is going to finish its campaign on 4/27, and it's perhaps a little bit more risky than some of these others, but potentially it advances the deck building genre in a way that has never been done before. And both Tom Heath and Rahdo say that the way that this works in this game, when you're using your deck cards, is that you will also use some of those cards as resources. And when you do, when you're making drinks and you're using cards as resources, they will leave your hand. And then you'll be able to get them back into your hand later. So it's kind of an interesting take on not necessarily trying to get good cards into your hand or bad cards out, which I think you're doing that as well, but the fact that some cards will leave your hand and then eventually cycle back into it, but there'll be a period where they're gone. And so your deck will become smaller at that time. So there's some strategy based around when you're making drinks, getting certain cards out of your hand for a time and kind of playing around that element of the deck building mechanic, which sounds really fascinating. But anyway, April 27th, Scrumpy Card Cider completes its funding. On April 29th, Empyreal Far Corners will complete its funding. Now, they had $100,000 as their minimum requested funding for this game. They're currently sitting at $72,000, so they haven't funded yet. However, from my experience looking at Kickstarters, and I evaluate almost every board game Kickstarter out there, I've noticed that most Kickstarters, it's kind of the formula here, do 2/3 of their business in the first 48 hours and 1/3 of their business in the last 24. So I am very confident that Empyreal Far Corners will hit its funding goal before April 29th. But right now they're at 0.7 or 7/10 of their minimum requested funding. So they're not there yet. Now, the reason why this is such a interesting Kickstarter, I guess, is first of all, it's for a train game, but it's a train game where magic is used. So unlike most train games where you have to have all of your rails connected to transport goods, in Empyreal Spells and Steam, which is the name of the original base game, you can actually teleport your goods from some of your train cars to other train cars. So it's set in this kind of magical world, which makes it different and interesting, different than Railways of the World or Age of Steam. It is a medium-heavy game for 2 to 6 players, and it's a train game. It's just a train game with magic, or a cube rails game with magic. Now, it's being published by Level 99 Games, which has done games like Argent Consortium, BattleCon, Millennium Blades, and Pixel Tactics. It's designed by Trey Chambers, who also designed Argent Consortium, as well as the original Empyreal game, and Harvest. And the art on this is by Laura Levito, who has worked on the Exceed fighting system, which is another game put out by Level 99. And Eunice Abigail Tiu, who worked on Argent and BattleCon. So the interesting thing about Empyreal Spells and Steam is that it is this magic train game, but also that when they did the original Kickstarter, they delivered, and then any retail copies very quickly just went out of print. So you couldn't get the game anywhere. So I think they're publishing this new mini expansion because that's all Far Corners is a mini expansion. I think the real reason for doing that is to be able to republish the base game and try to fund it through another Kickstarter so it can be made available to a whole new audience. Now, one thing you must know about this is that it gets labeled that word overproduced. Now, what that means is that this is not a super heavy game. It's not that complex, but it is massive in size. The box is actually deeper than the Gloomhaven box or the more recent Suburbia, crazy edition with like every single color in it. This box is bigger than those boxes, at least in depth. So it's deeper than Gloomhaven. It's a little bit, I think, taller than Gloomhaven as well, one way, but it's not as wide. But it is a big, big, big box for a relatively light train game. And there are a lot of components in this thing. So it is really beautiful. It's really nice. It's got a high level of production value on it. But there is always the question about this is it more than needs to exist for this light train game? Is it too much stuff? But if you're looking for a light train game with magic and you want it to be really, really well produced and have all this great content and components, this could be your thing. So for $9, you can get just the new Far Corners mini expansion. If you have all the old stuff, that's all you need. For $69, you can get Spells and Steam, so that's the original base game, with the new Far Corners mini expansion. For $109, you're going to throw in deluxe components with everything else, which is 216 molded resources with a pre-wash on it. And they look really nice. I mean, they look really nice. If I was getting this, I would definitely get those deluxe components as well. And also 6 heavyweight player folios. So instead of player boards, you can have these really nice player folios that kind of open up and close. And they look like a folio. It's really high quality. For $119, you're going to get everything I've mentioned before, but you're going to add on the As Above, So Below expansion. This is an expansion that will add solo play. So the original game is a 2 to 6 player game. As Above, So Below is going to add on 2 more player colors with more components and a lot of little extras, that kind of expand the gameplay in different ways. But those 2 extra player colors with their components. So instead of it being just a 2 to 6 player game, it expands it to a 1 to 8. So you can now play it with up to 8 players. You can also play it solo. If you go for the $159, you're going to throw those deluxe components back in because you won't get them at the 119 level. So the 119 level will be Spells and Steam, Far Corners, and As Above, So Below, but not the deluxe components. For $159, you're getting all that stuff with the deluxe components thrown back in. And then if you want to increase your pledge another $100 to $259, you're going to get 360 extra trains. You're going to get 8 kind of postcard poster prints and a hardcover art book. So that's the big price. That's the big pledge level for this one. And again, it will complete funding on April 29. Now on April 30th, our final Kickstarter of this video completes funding, and that is Hippocrates. And this is, their original funding goal was $50,000. They're sitting at $160,000. Actually, their funding goal was a little under 50. So they're at a little over 3 times their original minimum requested funding. Now, this is a medium-heavy game for 1 to 4 players. It is a tile placement game with some auction bidding. And it is being put out by Game Brewer, who I think is putting out some awesome stuff these days. So they did Chimera Station, they did Hentes, they did Gugong. Most recently, they did Paris, which was sort of a simple set collection area control game with really nice production value. And it's a lot of people's favorite game sort of at that complexity level right now. And more recently, they've done Arkwright, the card game, and Stroganoff, which just finished. But all of their games are just so well produced and beautiful and just great. So this one is designed by Alain Orban, who did Black Angel, Trois, or Troyes. If you don't know how to spell Trois, it's spelled Troyes, but it's called Trois. And also Tournai. And the artist is Laura Bevan, who worked on Ceylon and Polynesia, as well as the King's Guild and Between Two Cities of Mad King Ludwig. And this is easy. This one is just an $83 deluxe edition, 1 pledge level, that's it. There may be some pledge levels in there for multiple copies of the game, but I never get into that, and I never list pledge levels that don't include a copy of the game. So sometimes if Kickstarters will have certain pledge levels that give you like postcards or stuff like that, I don't even bother with that. Unless it's something like a mini expansion, as with Empyreal Spells in Steam, they have that $9 pledge level for Far Corners, that I include. Anyway, this is an $83 pledge, that's it, and it looks pretty neat. Now, it's essentially a tile placement, I suppose set collection to some degree, but what makes it look so cool is the art and the way when you're helping Hippocrates work on patience. That's what you're doing. You're working on patience. It feels a little bit like Darwin's Journey, except instead of helping Darwin discover a species, you're going to be helping Hippocrates heal patients back in his day. And it's got some very interesting mechanics where you're taking these tiles for the patients that you're working on and you sort of slot them onto your different doctors, and it creates this weird kind of tile network as you're healing people, and it looks really fascinating to me. So I'm very intrigued by Hippocrates. I think it looks pretty cool, and I probably will back this one. And again, this one concludes funding on April the 30th. So that completes this section of the video for today, the big Kickstarter section. Now, I only pledged one game from the previous period, only one, and that game was Robinson Crusoe, the collector's edition. And I did go all in on it. I wasn't planning to do that originally, but I wanted those Awakened Realms minis, and I wanted enough of the expansions and all the little things that for me to kind of cobble together my own version of what I wanted, just to exclude a few things. Some things I didn't want. I think like maybe there was an art book or something like that. It would have actually been even more expensive for me to kind of just get a lower pledge level and then add on the stuff that I wanted. So I did go for that all in. I'm really excited. I hear Robinson Crusoe is an amazing game, and I know it's something I'll be able to use on this channel in the future, even just as a solo game. I've heard such good things over the years. I'm really excited. If you don't know it, it's a sort of card selection game. It plays up to 4 players. It's an adventure exploration game that uses a lot of card play. There's scenario-based missions and kind of campaigns, but it's not a legacy game. And even though it can play up to 4 players, everything that I hear, it's really more of a solo game, or at best kind of 1 to 2 players. So that's where the strength of Robinson Crusoe is. And I'm really excited to kind of play it either as a solo or a 2-player game. But I love that kind of exploration and puzzle solving, so I'm really looking forward to playing that. Now I have 5 games that I acquired this period. So they are Cryo, which is the new Luke Laurie game. And Luke Laurie had Whistle Mountain come out, I think at the end of last year. I don't think it was this year, I think it was the end of last year. And Whistle Mountain is amazing. Everybody should just go out and buy it, play it. It's awesome. He also did Dwellings of Eldervale, which I liked but didn't love as much as Whistle Mountain. But Dwellings of Eldervale has totally taken the world by storm. It is, I think, the game right now for groups, wherever groups are able to actually play, maybe online. And he also did the Manhattan Project Energy Empire, previously, back in the day, like 5 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. But I'm excited for a new Luke Laurie game. I hear Cryo has some things in common with Dwellings of Eldervale, but I think it's more puzzly and less confrontational. And Cryo, I think, is the lightest game that he's worked on. But I'm really excited to get to it and to play it. I think it's going to be pretty good for what it is. I also got Gorinto in, which is a Kickstarter, and Gorinto reminds me a lot of Azul or maybe Reef. It's one of these games that has very chunky, tactile tiles, and it's very light, it's very simple. You're just kind of placing tiles and scoring points. And I liked the design of Gorinto. The theming has to do with sort of the 5 elements. I think there's void, earth, water, fire, and air, I think. And you're kind of moving tiles and collecting tiles, and each time you collect tiles, you collect it depending on the type of tile that you remove. But it's a very simple, spatial, kind of abstract strategy game, and it looks like it might be an Azul killer. So I'm excited to get to that one soon as well. I also, when I pre-ordered Cryo, I ordered Maglev Metro, which is by Ted Alspach, who does the Ultimate Werewolf games. He also did Suburbia, and it's a tile laying game, and I've heard really good things about it. So I think it's something I needed to buy and get played and make a video for, and that will be coming soon as well. Also, I get another Kickstarter game called Stronghold Undead. So previously there was Stronghold, which is sort of a 2-player head-to-head tower defense game put out by Portal Games, and then they later did an expansion for it called Undead. So this is sort of a new version. It bakes everything into one game, so you're getting the original Stronghold plus Stronghold Undead, sort of redesigned into one game with extra content. There's a really nice big map for it and a lot of cool extra stuff. So I'm really excited for that. I think that's going to be a 2-player game I'm going to really love. I don't know if my fiance Kristen's going to love it, but we'll see. So if not, I'll just have to find other people to play it with. But I have a feeling this is going to be a go-to 2-player game for me. It's heavy, and it's got lots of good choices, and it's pretty chunky. So I think as far as 2-player games go, this is one of the ones for me. And then finally, the last Time Stories expansion from the White Cycle that I'm still missing. I think if I move over here, let me see. You can't really see it on my shelf. I think it's moved down a little bit, but I have all of them but one that I'm still missing back there. And so now I have the last one, and that is Estrella drop. I had actually ordered this one before the last 2 games, the last 2 expansions in the Time Stories White Cycle, but it was waiting for Cryo to come in from pre-order. So it was the 3rd last one ordered, but the last one to arrive. And I'm excited. I'm excited to get deep into Time Stories. Now I have all of the White Cycle. Kristen and I have previously completed the base game. I really enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of what they do with that game system and the different stories that they tell in different time periods. So that wraps up the games acquired for this period, which leaves us with just the games played. And there are only 2 games this time. I've been busy doing things. I haven't had as much time to play games. And the 2 games I did play were light games. I'm more of a heavy gamer, so I've been playing some light games lately. And they are 2 games that came in last period. And they are Horrified and Reef. So Horrified, I actually really like. It is a simple, light co-op game, very easy. You can teach it in 5 minutes. Anyone can play it, but I like the monster theming behind it, and it's fun. The fact that every monster has to be disabled a different way and then killed, and then the variable player characters that you can use and the variable monsters that may come out, it's a lot of fun. For me, I think Horrified is now replacing Forbidden Island as sort of my very light go-to intro-level co-op game that I'll probably teach non-gamer friends, kids, stuff like that. It's a lot of fun, and I like it. I like playing it. Even though it's kind of light for me, it's just so much fun to play. I had a really good time playing. I played it solo mode, I think. So my fiance and Kristen and I, we played the intro game, and we played against Dracula and I think the creature from the Black Lagoon. I believe those were the 2 kind of recommended intro villains. And we beat them. I think the terror track only went up once on us. We beat them pretty easily. And then I played solo a little bit later. I increased the difficulty level. I played the Archaeologist for the 2nd time, and I think my monsters that game were Frankenstein and the Bride, and the Wolfman and the Invisible Man. And when you're playing solo, you actually start the terror track at 3, and you don't want it to go to, I think it's 10. I think you'll lose if it goes to 10. So it only moved up 1. It moved from 3 to 4 during my game. So I guess next time I'm going to need to try it at the difficult level. But I enjoy the game. It's light, but it's super fun. And then lastly, Reef, which is another super light game. And this, again, kind of reminds me of Gorinto or Azul. It is a game with these very chunky plastic pieces. And every turn, you're either taking a card or you're playing a card. And if you play a card, you get 2 chunky pieces, you put it onto your coral reef, and then you try to score points off of the scoring situation on the bottom. And you just keep doing that until one of the colors goes away or the cards are completed. And it's just score points, who scores the most points. And again, I'm not huge on light games, but as far as light games go, I think Reef is a great winner because you can explain it. You can teach this thing in like 2 or 3 minutes, and then you can go. And even though it's a light game, there's always good, really good decisions to be made where you feel like you have agency in these decisions. And it's just a really good puzzle in terms of, what pieces of plastic am I taking now and planning for scoring later. So you kind of have this sort of assembly line in your brain of cards where you need to get certain pieces to score later cards. So you can kind of make it as complex as you want to in your own mind in terms of how much you're getting this assembly line going and how well you're able to get the coral pieces out in place to score later. So sometimes you may not score at all for a card or 2 because you're just setting up later scoring situations that you'll score really highly on. But I like it. I think it's, an easy game to teach. Anyone can play, but it's got really good choices and it's fun. So both of those games to me are just keepers, and I would recommend them to anyone. They're just really good, and especially if you like lighter games, if that's kind of your forte, and you haven't checked out one of these games or both, please do so. They're great little gems. That brings us to the end of the video. So welcome to the channel if this is your first time here. Please consider liking and subscribing, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for spending your time listening to me and listening to what I have to say. If you are thinking, are thinking, or going to think about any of those Kickstarters that are going to finish funding in the next couple of weeks, hopefully I was able to help you out. Maybe I gave you some ideas. Maybe you want to back something now that you didn't want to before. But either way, I hope I just gave you some information to help you. These Kickstarter update videos come out twice a month. I'm also currently in the process of producing a lot of first impressions videos on games that are new. And as soon as I sort of get caught up with those, I'll also be putting out some full teach and review videos. So take a look around the channel, stay tuned. There's a lot of cool stuff coming. In another 2 weeks, I'll have another one of these monthly update videos to try to help advise you on what you may or may not want to back on Kickstarter. Have a great weekend. And I just got vaccinated today. My first shot, the Pfizer shot. I'm still feeling pretty good. My fiance Kristen is not feeling so well. She had hers yesterday. But please go out and get vaccinated. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Have a great weekend or week, and I will see you in my next video. Take care. Bye.